In the stillness of the early dawn, when a fog lay like a soft blanket over the earth, something stirred on the quiet farm of Old Man Jenkins. Doves cooed softly, and a rooster heralded the new day, unaware of the danger lurking just beyond the tree line. The world seemed at peace, but darkness was creeping closer, ready to burst through the calm. Three shadowy figures slid through the woods, the crunch of dried leaves barely piercing the calm. They were a gang of bandits, weary from a life of crime, their eyes gleaming with greed and anticipation. Jamie, a tall man with a scar snaking down his cheek, led the pack. His heart raced, driven by a hunger for quick cash. Harlan and Pete, his accomplices, trailed behind like restless pups chasing a scent. The farm was ripe for the picking, isolated, with nothing but a barn and a weathered farmhouse standing as lone sentinels against the sunrise. Old Man Jenkins, while kind-hearted and nurturing to his crops, was rumored to have a stash from years of saving. The scheme was simple: break in, grab the cash, and vanish before the sun fully claimed the sky. They approached the house with caution, but inside Jenkins was already awake, the air heavy with the smell of brewed coffee and fresh bread. Jenkins, a man in his 60s, with sun-kissed skin and gentle wrinkles, stood at the kitchen counter, his thoughts drifting to the long day ahead. He had no idea chaos was approaching. As he rolled out dough for his famous apple pie, the rhythmic slaps of his hands against the counter became a rhythm of comfort. But that peace was about to shatter. With a swift motion, Jamie kicked open the front door, the hinges groaning in protest. "Get down, old man," he shouted, a sinister grin plastered across his face. Harlan and Pete snickered as they slipped inside, holding the cold, metallic tools of their trade bats and crowbars, sharp reminders of their intent. Old Man Jenkins looked up, mistake hanging like a question in the air. He was not one to scare easily. His eyes narrowed, not with fear but with resolve. "Boys, you've come to the wrong place," he said, voice steady and low, like the rumble of thunder just before a storm. He took a slow step forward, hands resting casually at his sides. Jamie's confidence wavered. "You heard me." Jenkins' voice was calm, laced with an unexpected authority. The room felt different now, as if the air had thickened with challenge. Harlan snorted. "You're all alone here." "It's not about what I have, lads," Jenkins replied, a faint smile creeping onto his lips. And with that he stepped back, revealing an old trapdoor leading into his cellar, hidden beneath a faded rug. The bandits shared confused glances. This wasn't the script they had rehearsed in their heads. Jamie barked, waving his bat with a flourish. But Jenkins, now emboldened, took a few light-hearted steps backward, stepping onto the trapdoor, his voice rising. "You see, boys, this farm isn't what it seems. There's more than crops growing here." At that moment, Jenkins yanked the rug free, his wise hands revealing the secret mechanism. Before they could react, he heaved the trapdoor open, the wood creaking like it was alive, waking from a long sleep. Down that door went his years of preparation, a collection of gadgets, secrets, and most importantly a plan. Jamie laughed, though it sounded forced. But there was an undeniable flicker of worry in his eyes. He didn't know what lay below. "Scare? No, but this may surprise you," Jenkins said, dropping a small lantern down into the darkness. The glow flickered weakly, illuminating a maze of ropes, pulleys, and traps, fashioned from years of farming wisdom and a bit of creativity. Pete's bravado faltered. "This, gentleman, is a little insurance policy," Jenkins said with a twinkle in his eye. And before they could blink, he pulled a lever on the side of the wall. The ground trembled slightly, and the bandits froze in shock as an old net shot up from beneath the floorboards, ensnaring Jamie. Panic etched across his face as he struggled to free himself, his bat clanging uselessly against the hardwood floor. Harlan lunged forward, but Jenkins was ready. He tossed a bucket of flour that burst like a cloud on impact, blinding Harlan. In the chaos, old instincts kicked in. Jenkins was quick, and with a deftness that belied his years, he grabbed a nearby broom and wedged it between the door frame, trapping Pete in a corner. Now the old farmer stood squarely in the room, commanding it like a king defending his castle. "You wanted my money. But now you get a lesson instead," Jenkins declared, pulling out his phone to call the local sheriff. His calm voice contrasted sharply with the wild flailing of the bandits. The confusion and panic only deepened as Jamie shouted from the net, "You can't do this." Jenkins echoed, raising an eyebrow. "With thieves, the only deal I'm making is with the law." As the sheriff's voice crackled over the line, Jenkins didn't miss a beat. He coolly explained the situation, the tone of his voice unfazed even when the bandits squirmed in their binds. In that moment he felt an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. A siren pierced the morning air, a distant reminder that help was on its way. The sound sparked a wild panic. Jamie's desperation morphed into rage. "You'll regret this, old man." But Jenkins stood firm, a serene guardian over his land. "Not today, boys." With each passing second, the bandits' resolve dulled, and they began to see the futility of their situation. The sheriff's car pulled up, the blue lights flashing in hypnotic rhythm. Officer Daniels, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped out of the vehicle. He called out, a knowing smirk spreading across his face as he surveyed the scene. "Just an impromptu lesson in humility for some wayward souls," Jenkins replied, his eyes still keen. "A good lecture, too," Officer Daniels added, tapping his pen against his notebook, amused by the audacity of the bandits. As the sirens blared and the sun peaked higher in the sky, illuminating the dusty farm, the world contracted to that small moment. Here was a symbol. The quiet farmer stood against unwarranted chaos, wielding cunning where brawn was expected. Officer Daniels moved in, swiftly cuffing Jamie while Harlan fumbled around, trying to catch his breath amidst the flower cloud. With each cuff, the illusion of power the bandits had felt crumbled like leaves underfoot. "I told you not to mess with quiet people," Jenkins said, his voice cutting through the chaos, filled with calm authority. The sheriff loaded the bandits into the patrol car, their protests turning to whispers as it sank in that they had lost. The dawning realization of how far they'd fallen weighed heavily. As silence returned, only broken by the distant bird calls and rustling leaves, Jenkins stepped outside to the warm embrace of sunlight and relief. He looked around his pharma place he had poured his heart into, suddenly more precious than ever. It was more than dirt and crops. It was home. And as the sun climbed higher, Old Man Jenkins chuckled softly to himself, shaking his head in disbelief. They had come to rob, to threaten, but what they didn't see was the spirit of resilience that ran through those fields, sown into the rows of crops, as deep as the roots in the soil. No longer just a farmer, but a guardian of his land, he returned to the kitchen. The smell of baking pie wafted through the air, mingling with a sense of victory that laced each breath he took. Today was his day, a lesson not just for the bandits, but a reminder for himself about the power of standing one's ground. As he peeled apples for his famous pie, he knew that every slice would taste a little sweeter today. The sun had barely begun to rise over the quiet expanse of Thompson's acres, casting a golden hue over fields brimming with ripe corn and swaying wildflowers. Silence wrapped around the farm like a comforting blanket, occasionally disturbed by a gentle breeze or the soft cooing of doves. But today, beneath that calm veneer, tension was stirring, a storm was brewing, just out of sight. In the dense woods bordering the property, a group of 3 bandits lay in wait, barely visible among the branches and thick underbrush. They were scruffy and ragged, a portrait of desperation, their eyes gleaming with hunger and greed. Sam, their leader, had a weathered face, lined with years of bad choices. His 2 accomplices, Drew and Billy, were younger and more reckless, their anxiety bubbling beneath bravado. They were scoping out the farm, lured by rumors that Old Man Thompson had a stash hidden away, a treasure chest of cash and valuables just waiting to be pillaged. As they watched the sun inch upward, Sam's voice cut through the quiet, low and urgent. "This is the place. A quiet farm like this. You know he's got something tucked away." But the idea of robbing a farm wasn't just about the payout, it was a gamble. And when people feel cornered and desperate, they often make reckless decisions. Billy's fingers trembled with excitement, his youthful bravado masking his fear. He glanced back at Sam, searching for reassurance. Drew shrugged, trying to appear calm. "Who's gonna help him? He's out here all alone, just a grumpy old man." With a mix of fear and adrenaline, they crept closer, pushing through the underbrush until they reached the edge of the farm. The sun now bathed everything in a warm glow, deceptively calm. Across the vast expanse, Old Man Thompson moved slowly, tending to his chores, oblivious to the tempest brewing just beyond his fence. Unbeknownst to them, Thompson had lived a long life on that patch of land. He had seen adversity come and go, faced storms that threatened his crops, and dealt with people who tried to take what wasn't theirs. He was not just a farmer, he was a man steeped in resilience. That morning, as he hummed softly to himself while lifting bales of hay, he sensed an unusual stirring in the air. Something was off, an instinct honed by years of experience. As the bandits approached, hearts pounding, their hands sweaty and trembling, Thompson's rusted barn, weathered yet sturdy, stood as a silent witness. It was more than just a building. It was a fortification with hidden nooks and crannies. Thompson had spent years perfecting his craft, and that included knowing how to defend what was his. When the trio finally decided to make their move, they sprinted toward the farmhouse with the determination of men who had nothing left to lose. Their footsteps crunched against gravel, echoing like a distant alarm bell in Thompson's ears. The old farmer looked up, his instincts kicking in. He dropped the pitchfork and leaned against the barn door as he listened intently. Sam urged, his voice sharp with urgency. They flung the farmhouse door open, the hinges creaking as if echoing their ominous intent. "Old man," Sam shouted, his bravado faltering slightly, replaced by the weight of the moment. But instead of fear, Thompson felt a calmness wash over him. He stepped out into the light, folding his arms across his chest. His voice was steady and filled with a quiet power that demanded attention. This was not an old man trembling before younger aggressors. This was a man unyielding despite the odds. Drew sneered, trying to mask his rising dread with bravado. "I said," Thompson replied, his voice low but strong, "you're making a mistake." The bandits exchanged anxious glances, suddenly aware of the weight of their folly. Thompson had always been a mystery to the locals, a solitary figure who preferred the company of crops to people. Perhaps it was that very solitude that had allowed him to think deeply about the farm. Every nook, every cranny lived in his mind, a map of ingenuity. "Whatever you think you're gonna take, you won't find it here," Thompson stated, his words deliberate, echoing the confidence that flowed through him. A moment of hesitation fell over the bandits. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Sam's eyes. Thompson stepped aside, motioning them to enter the farmhouse. "You've come all this way." Reluctantly, marching with trepidation, they stepped inside, the faint smell of coffee and baked bread greeting them. The interior was inviting, filled with memories of laughter and hard work. A simple table stood in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs, each with a story of its own. It was a stark contrast to the chaos they had imagined. Thompson gestured, surprising them with an air of calm that left the bandits on edge. "Why should we?" "You could just be," Sam started, but Thompson interrupted. "Because you're here now and you've taken the first step into my world. I could call the sheriff, let them take you away, but would you rather sit and listen?" Beneath the table, Thompson's weathered hands moved deftly toward a pulley system he had installed during a late-night bout of inspiration. It acted as both a defense mechanism and a testament to his ingenuity. The bandits shifted uncomfortably, uncertain of where this conversation was headed. "Look, old man," Sam said, trying to regain control. "We have nothing to chat about." Thompson leaned back in his chair, steady. "I think you're overlooking something. You could be better than this. You don't have to live like this, resorting to fear and violence. Look around you." For a heartbeat, all of them paused. Hints of disbelief marred their expressions. He was offering different futures without the threat of violence. Drew chuckled nervously, but Thompson's gaze bore into each of them, peeling back the layers of bravado. "I'm serious. You think this life is all hard work and sweat, but it's also freedom." A powerful silence enveloped the room. Thompson continued, drawing from a well of wisdom gained over decades of toil. "Everyone has dreams, even you three. You can chase them too, use your hands for something better. Join me, see what it takes to grow something of your own." Within the moment's tension, Billy, the youngest, felt something stir inside. Was it fear or realization? Either way, something was shifting. "You really think we could?" he stammered, doubt dripping from each word. Thompson nodded, his eyes warm with sincerity. "I do. I've seen it before. Some people are only one choice away from a different life." Sam shifted, his earlier bravado crumbling. "This isn't how it was supposed to go. We're supposed to rob you, not what?" Thompson leaned in, his voice low but unyielding. There was strength in vulnerability, in standing against choices that felt inevitable. "Boys, this life of crime leads down a dark path." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, mingling with the sound of Thompson's words. They wove a spell over the bandits, a thread of something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope, possibility. As moments stretched thin, Sam finally took a breath. Thompson nodded, a quiet conviction in his voice. Just then, a sound cut through the silence, the distinct crunch of tires on gravel. Thompson's heart raced, though his expression remained serene. Panicked glances shot between them. Sam stood, uncertainty etched across his face. Thompson's voice was steady. "You can run." With the rising sound of voices approaching, Sam, Drew, and Billy found themselves at a crossroads. There was a world outside defined by crime and fear, but here stood a life filled with labor, authenticity, and potentially change. "Consider yourself lucky," Sam muttered, taking a step back toward the door. Before Thompson could respond, the bandits shot out the door and into the morning light, fear driving them forward. But they hesitated just beyond the threshold, glancing back. "It's your choice," Thompson called after them. As they disappeared into the trees, Thompson stood at the door, the sunlight bathing him in warmth. Relief washed over him, knowing he had stood his ground, not just as a farmer but as a man who believed in second chances. Days turned into weeks, but the quiet sense of victory remained. Occasionally, he wondered about the bandits, hoped they found what they were looking for, even if it wasn't the path they had initially chosen. And in the heart of that solitude, Thompson continued to cultivate his land, nurturing not only crops but the very essence of resilience that stayed strong against the tides of despair. Because sometimes, the quiet ones have the loudest lessons to teach. And on a simple farm, beneath the vastness of the open sky, Old Man Thompson stood ready to share his harvest of wisdom with anyone brave enough to listen. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet farm of Old Man Henderson. A gentle breeze rustled the tall grass, and everything felt peaceful, but lurking just outside this serene world were three figures, watching with hungry eyes. Slowly, almost like predators stalking their prey, the bandits crept through the nearby woods. Their leader, a man named Jack, had a glint of desperation in his eyes. He was tired of scrambling for change, tired of living on the fringes. He scanned the open field stretching out before him, a rich farm untouched and tempting. "This is it," he whispered to his crew, his voice barely audible. His companions, Rick and Tommy, nodded eagerly, their resolve fueled by promises of riches. They had discussed this moment too many times to count, a desperate plan to leave behind their life of petty theft and struggles. But that day, as they prepared to invade the quiet farm, none of them realized they were about to go head-to-head with something far more formidable than mere old crops, a seasoned farmer with plans of his own. Old Man Henderson was a man of the earth, toughened by decades of work under the relentless sun. When he stood tall by the edge of his property, he wasn't just a farmer, he was a guardian of his land. He watched the distant trees and felt the air shift, sensing that something was off-kilter. The birds were quiet, and a feeling curled inside him, something he had learned to trust over the years. It was a sense of impending danger. As the bandits stealthily approached, whispering nervously to one another, Henderson quietly collected a few things: a rusty old shotgun, some rope, and a long-awaited sense of resolve. There was a hidden confidence in his posture, a silent promise to himself that he wouldn't back down from this challenge. The bandits reached the farmhouse, the wooden door resting slightly ajar, giving them access to what they hoped would be an easy haul of cash and valuables. Jack motioned for silence, and they slipped inside, hearts thumping with the thrill of the moment. The air was thick with the scent of fresh hay, and something sweet, perhaps old wood and faint traces of baked pie. Jack said, his voice barely a whisper, They fanned out, Rick heading toward the kitchen while Tommy took the stairs and Jack remained in the front room, mind racing through the potential spoils. But Old Man Henderson was not far behind. He moved with a calm certainty, every step deliberate and purposeful. He peered into the window, seeing shadows flitting about inside his home. Time for a welcoming party, he said to himself, steeling his resolve. Henderson had never been one to back down, especially in defense of what he had earned with years of hard work. Rick burst into the kitchen, his eyes gleaming. Look! But what he found instead was a farmhouse filled with memories, not just papers piled on counters but photos hung on walls, reminders of laughter and love. For a fleeting moment he felt a flicker of something, a pang of guilt. Before he could dwell on it, Jack's voice rang out. The urgency snapped him back, and with that he started rummaging through drawers, tossing aside forgotten utensils and dusty old recipes. Meanwhile, Tommy stumbled back down the stairs. His voice was laced with frustration. Suddenly, Old Man Henderson swung the door open. "Boys, you really shouldn't be in here," he said, his tone surprisingly calm. The bandits froze, caught in a moment of shock. Jack turned to face him, the bravado caving into apprehension. "What's an old man like you gonna do to us?" Henderson replied, his voice steady as a rock, gazing into their wild eyes. Jack scoffed, trying to regain the upper hand. "You think we're scared of you." But Henderson stood firm, a silent giant. "Listen, boys, you don't understand what you're stepping into. This farm has been my life." In that moment, something shifted in the air. Rick's bravado began to falter as he glanced at the old man. There was something almost protective about him, a sense of inner strength that was both chilling and inspiring. With a quick motion, Henderson reached for his shotgun, not aiming it but holding it firmly, a warning more than a threat. "This is your last chance. Leave now and I'll let you go." Tommy fidgeted, the walls feeling as if they were closing in. He faltered, realizing just how far they had crossed a line. Was the promise of easy money worth it? "That's right. You didn't come here for that," Henderson replied, his voice calm yet firm. "But sometimes you have to make choices." The tension in the room was palpable, like a lightning bolt ready to strike. The bandits faced the old man, and for the first time in the chaos they actually hesitated. A battle of wills unfolded right before them, a moment suspended in time. Was the lure of a quick score really worth the risks they faced? Jack's voice dripped with skepticism, but he sensed that his bravado was fading. Henderson took a deep breath, letting the moment stretch out. "I could call the sheriff and you'd be in cuffs before the sun sets, or maybe we can talk." Jack scoffed, though there was less bite to his words now. "Hard work," Henderson said. "A chance to learn how to fend for yourselves. I can teach you how to stop running and start building something real." Rick shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. But then Henderson continued, his voice dropping to a more sincere note. "Think about it, a chance to create a future." Against the backdrop of their desperation, the seeds of doubt began to plant themselves in the minds of the bandits. They were thieves not by nature but by necessity. Each man stood uncertain, wrestling with the allure of crime while questioning the life they had chosen, their dreams buried beneath layers of hardship. Tommy finally said, breaking the silence. His voice trembled, but his eyes glimmered with an unexpected hope. Henderson nodded. "Yes, you'd have to work hard. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it." Jack scoffed but felt a flush of doubt creeping through his bravado. This old man, who looked so fragile yet stood with an unwavering spirit, had somehow flipped the script. Henderson locked eyes with him, and for the first time, Jack felt the weight of their decision settle like a stone in his gut. The bandits stepped back, feeling trapped in a web of their making. They thought they had come for an easy score, but perhaps they had wandered into a different kind of reckoning. "I say we give it a chance," Tommy whispered, looking at his companions. Suddenly the air felt charged, as if time itself held its breath, and in that moment of uncertainty, bridge building began. "You'll have to prove yourselves," Henderson said, breaking the tension. Rick's brave facade crumbled. "I believe you can. It's a choice," Henderson replied. "The path of crime has been easy, but it leads nowhere good." The bandits exchanged apprehensive glances, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. An unfamiliar sense of camaraderie began to emerge amidst their fear, appealing to their need for something more than survival. After an extended silence, Jack finally let out a shaky breath. "Fine, we'll give it a shot." Henderson smiled softly, glad to have made a connection despite their rocky start. "That's all I ask. Let's start with cleaning the barn." And so began an unlikely transformation. Over the days that followed, laughter mingled with the labor. They found themselves discovering more than simple chores. They learned the craft of farming, the value of hard work, and the rising sun's promise of new beginnings. Jack, Rick, and Tommy slowly shed their identities as bandits and began to see new futures in the toil of the land. Every morning they rose with the sun, tending to crops and livestock. They listened to Henderson's stories of family, hardship, and resilience. With their hands dirty and hearts brave, they slowly forged a bond, each moment stitching together a tapestry of hope. It wasn't easy, but they found joy in simple tasks. They discovered purpose in planting seeds and harvesting crops, a stark contrast to the empty promise of a life spent chasing shadows. Days turned into weeks, and life on the farm didn't just change their routine, it altered their very essence. One evening, as the sun burned low on the horizon, they stood together, gazing out over the fields. The corn swayed gently in the breeze, and for the first time Jack felt the roots of belonging take hold. "We really did it," he breathed, taking it all in. Henderson stood nearby, a proud glint in his eyes. "Remember this moment. You've built something real." That night they sat beneath the stars, a sense of camaraderie wrapping around them like a warm blanket. They shared stories and dreams, weaving a fabric of brotherhood. Quiet laughter echoed in the night air, a symphony of hope blooming amidst the remnants of their past. In the coming months, the farm flourished. But it wasn't just the crops that thrived. The bandits had transformed into something greater than themselves. The choices they had made had morphed them into men of integrity and determination, redefining their futures against the backdrop of Old Man Henderson's lessons. Looking back, they realized they had stolen something precious after all, not from the old man but from themselves, the chance for redemption, the path toward purpose. They had learned the beauty of hard work and the prize of dreams worth chasing. As for Henderson, he had gained more than just helpers. He discovered the power of forgiveness, the strength of shared responsibility, and the unyielding hope that could rise from even the darkest corners. What began as a potential confrontation morphed into an unexpected alliance, weaving together threads of trust and transformation. And the quiet farm, well, it became a sanctuary, a testament to the journey of three men who had once walked dark paths but found their way back into the light. In their newfound home beneath the peace of brightening skies, they had all learned. Sometimes the best treasures are not the ones you take, but the lives you build. The sun dipped low in the sky, painting the horizon in strokes of gold and crimson, casting a warm glow over the quiet farm of Old Man Jenkins. For years, this farm had been a sanctuary, a place where hard work bore fruit, and life moved at its own calm pace. The air was filled with the soft sounds of nature, chirping crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the distant sound of cows mooing. But on this fateful evening, the tranquility was about to shatter. Just beyond the perimeter of the farm, three figures moved like shadows through the tall grass. They were bandits, cloaked in desperation and bravado, sent on a mission that could change their fates forever. Each step closer to the farmhouse felt electrifying. The leader of the group, a man named Max, had seen too many days filled with hunger and regret. "Tonight's the night," he whispered, his voice low and determined. "This old man's got to have some cash tucked away." Beside him, Danny and Joe nodded, their eyes flashing with that intoxicating mix of anxiety and excitement. They were desperate men, and desperation often clouds judgment. They approached the farmhouse, imagining the riches waiting inside. But what they didn't know was that they were about to step into a world of unexpected resilience. Inside, Old Man Jenkins was piecing together his dinner. The kitchen was warm, filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering vegetables from the garden. Jenkins, in his late 60s, was a sturdy man with rough hands, calloused from years of labor. His body was weathered, but his spirit remained vibrant, indomitable, and watchful. Suddenly, a noise from outside caught his ear, the crunching of twigs, muffled voices. He paused, a spoon hanging limply over the pot. Jenkins had lived long enough to trust his instincts. Something was off. He carefully set down the spoon and moved to the front window, peering through the sheer curtains. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. 3 figures were approaching his home. The way they moved furtive, anxious. It was clear they were up to no good. A surge of resolve filled him as he thought of what he had spent a lifetime building. He wasn't about to let anyone take it away from him. As the bandits neared the door, Jenkins quickly devised a plan that would turn the tables. He went to the back of the kitchen, grabbing a heavy iron skillet, something he'd used countless times for cooking but now would serve a far different purpose. He found a small, old-fashioned bell he always rang for his nighttime cows. With a strategic mind ignited by the urgency, Jenkins found his hidden stash of old gardening supplies in the shed. He grabbed some ropes and a net, carefully laid aside for a different day's labor. Meanwhile, the bandits were whispering among themselves. Danny asked, glancing nervously around. "Who cares?" "We'll be quick," Max snapped, confidence rising in him as they reached for the door. With a swift kick, Max pushed the door open and the hinges creaked ominously. "Get down, old man." But rather than a whimpering farmer, they were met with a calm yet piercing gaze. Jenkins stood tall, skillet in one hand, the remnants of his dinner forgot. He said, an eyebrow raised, the hint of a smile threatening to break through. "Yeah, that's right," Max said, taken aback for a moment. Jenkins glanced around his home, the vibrant memories hanging on the walls. This place was not just a house, it was his life. He replied, his voice steady, lacking the tremor of fear that the bandits had expected. Danny's face twisted into a snarl, brimming with youthful arrogance. "Because we've got the advantage." "Old, yes, some." Jenkins took a step forward, his grip tightening around the skillet. The bandits snickered, caught up in their bravado. But then something began to seed doubt in their minds. There was an unshakable energy in Jenkins, something that made them hesitate. Max stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. "You're going to regret this." Before he could finish, Jenkins pivoted and threw the skillet with an impressive arc, aimed not at the bandits but at a wooden shelf nearby. The skillet clanged against the wood, startling the bandits and causing them to flinch. Max stumbled backward, unable to take his eyes off the man's sudden unpredictability. "What the?" Danny gasped. In an instant, Jenkins sprang into action, racing toward the back door. It swung wide open, and he called out to his loyal dogs who had been laying peacefully in the yard. "Lassie!" The 2 border collies sprang to their feet, barking fiercely as they barreled toward the intruders, their instincts kicking in. With their fur slicked in the fading light, they dashed toward the bandits, eyes ablaze with protectiveness. Max shouted, panic creeping in, but it was too late. The dogs lunged, barking loudly, and Danny stumbled over his own feet, tumbling to the ground. Danny yelled, fear overtaking him as the dogs circled him like a fluffy whirlwind. Max shouted, trying to regain control, but the second dog had already caught Joe by the pant leg, pulling him back. And just like that, what began as a daring robbery spiraled into chaos. Jenkins had the momentum on his side. He quickly crafted a makeshift trap with the ropes and net he had stashed earlier, wrapping it around the nearest tree. When the third bandit tried to escape, he was ensnared, trapped like prey caught in a hunter's web. Jenkins called out, his tone steady, giving chase with unexpected agility. The bandits found themselves retreating, fear and confusion twisting through their ranks like wildfire. Dashing, they ran through the open door, the warm glow of the farmhouse's lights flickering in the dark. But they weren't counting on Jenkins's quick thinking. With the dogs barking behind him for encouragement, Jenkins called out to them, "You wanted money, didn't you?" Max paused, panting heavily, confusion etched across his face. "This farm, this place, has more to offer than what's in your wildest imaginations. You'll find a life built on honesty, loyalty, and hard work." For a moment, time seemed to stop while they looked into the farmer's determined eyes. It was a desperate gamble, an offer so offbeat they didn't know how to respond. "You've got to be kidding," Rick muttered, glancing at his friends. Jenkins leaned in, his voice sincere. "You're young. You've got time to turn things around." As the dogs continued to bark, Jenkins maintained steady eye contact with the bandits, his sincerity breaking through their hardened exteriors. Max, still panting, ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "You really think we could change?" Jenkins shrugged. "The world can be a tough place. I've had my own share of struggles, but I learned that hard work and honesty bring deeper satisfaction than a quick buck." The sound of sirens drifted in from the distance, a reminder that their time was limited. Should they bolt and face the unknown or listen to the old farmer's offer? Standing there, they weighed their options like a scale teetering precariously. Suddenly, Danny, who had remained quiet through most of this, broke in. "What if he's telling the truth? We've been running our whole lives." Max hesitated, glancing at Danny and then back at Jenkins. With a soft smile, Jenkins shook his head. "I won't, I promise. We'll help each other. But if you really want to prove yourselves, show me you can do real work." It was a turning point. The bandits exchanged glances, fear, disbelief, and now something resembling hope flickered like fireflies in their eyes. "Let's see if he's serious," Rick finally said. "All right," Max replied, uncertainty swirling in his heart like a tornado. "We'll give it a shot, but only for tonight. Then you can leave and never look back," Jenkins replied, voice firm but inviting, and as the sirens grew closer, Jenkins stepped back, opening the door wide. One by one, the bandits stepped inside, and just like that, an uneasily woven bond began to form, a thread of transformation in a tapestry that once had seemed doomed. As the night settled in, Jenkins showed them everything: the simple way to care for the animals, the art of planting seeds, and the labor of love that went into growing food. They found themselves laughing while digging dirt, sharing stories that once felt buried under layers of egos and hardship. Days turned into weeks. The gang members worked tirelessly, and Jenkins watched them transform. Slowly, they started to shed their old identities, each step marking their growth. They harvested potatoes, learned to milk cows, and tended to the chickens. With each chore came a small victory, and as laughter filled the air, those desperate bandits became young men learning the art of resilience. Every night, under the blanket of stars, they sat with Jenkins, sharing stories over hot stew made from vegetables grown right there on the farm. Jenkins talked about life, the struggle, the love, the losses, and he imparted lessons that no school could ever teach. They learned about patience and care, values that ran deeper than any quick score. The weight of past regrets began to lift, and they found themselves crafting new dreams, ones built from soil and hard work rather than stolen moments. Whenever insecurity crept in, Jenkins was there, hands on shoulders, wise words ready to lift them up. Months later, the quiet farm stood as a testament to change. A vibrant garden blossomed, and forgiveness anchored their camaraderie. Old Man Jenkins had not just saved his farm, he had redefined lives and created something far more valuable than possessions: a true partnership. As they stood together, admiring their harvest beneath the glorious sunset, they found themselves no longer bandits but stewards of the land, chasing dreams and futures they had once thought impossible. When they looked at Jenkins, they saw a mentor, a father figure, and a friend, the keeper of a legacy that had transformed despair into possibility. Danny grinned, leaning against the wooden fence, watching as the sky turned to twilight. Jenkins chuckled, his eyes glistening with pride. "Every single one of us has the potential to change." As the candles flickered and the stars began to twinkle, the quiet farm echoed with laughter, a joyful symphony of second chances, forever imprinted on the hearts of those who dared to turn their lives around. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the quiet farm of Old Man Thompson. The world felt still, but the tension crackling in the air told another story, one hidden just beneath the surface. In the shadows of the nearby woods, three figures crouched low, their eyes gleaming with a mix of desperation and greed. "Tonight's the night," whispered Jack, the leader of the group, his breath quickening with excitement. The thrill coursed through their veins as if they were about to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. His two companions, a wiry man named Pete and a burly figure called Frank, exchanged nervous glances. They'd been through tough times, but tonight's plan felt different, more dangerous, more alive. They were bandits, but more importantly, they were men backed into a corner, relying on each other to break free. They crept closer to the farmhouse, the crunch of dried leaves underfoot echoing like a countdown to chaos. Inside the cozy house, Old Man Thompson bustled about, his hands deftly preparing for bed. Years of working on the farm had made him sharp, and despite his age, he retained a keen awareness of everything around him. Tonight felt off. He paused, staring out the window. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he scanned the darkness surrounding his land. He sighed, brushing off the feeling. Just the wind, he muttered to himself, but the unease lingered, tickling the edges of his thoughts. With a final glance at the moonlit field, he settled into his armchair, but sleep eluded him. Something was coming, a storm of some kind. Back outside, the bandits were assessing their target. "This is it," Jack said quietly, his voice a mix of confidence and thrill. "Just in and out. We grab whatever cache he's hiding, and we're gone before he even knows what hit him." They moved stealthily, with Jack leading the way to the front door. The rough wood creaked as he twisted the doorknob locked. "Of course," he cursed under his breath. With cautious steps, they rounded the barn, peeking into the windows, assessing potential targets for a quick hit. As they approached the back door, Pete fidgeted nervously, glancing at the darkened farmhouse. He muttered, worry gnawing at him. "Lax," Jack answered, though he felt the tension creeping in himself. "If he has any sense, he won't mess with us." But deep down, they all knew there was a risk involved, a lingering fear that could peel away the bravado they desperately maintained. The vulnerability in their hearts clashed with the bravado they projected, an age-old struggle between fear and desire. With a swift kick, Jack forced open the back door, and it swung open with an ominous creak. He hissed, motioning for Pete and Frank to follow him. Old Man Thompson, still restless in his chair, was startled awake by the noise. His mind raced as he took stock of the situation. It was no longer an ordinary night. He could sense trouble was brewing. Rising from the chair, a creak echoing as he stood, Thompson quietly reached for the old shotgun he kept propped in the corner. It was time to defend his home. Inside, the bandits rummaged through drawers and cabinets. Jack was rifling through a cupboard while Pete scanned the tables for anything valuable. "Come on," he growled, frustration seeping into his voice. But they found nothing more than old recipe cards and dusty pots. Frank, meanwhile, had wandered into the adjacent room. As he turned around, he bumped into Thompson, who had slipped inside like a ghost, shotgun raised but steady. Thompson's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Startled, Frank stumbled back, nearly tripping, his bravado evaporating. The bandits had underestimated the old man entirely. Jack swung around, his once fearless demeanor wavering. "What are you going to do, old man?" Thompson tightened his grip on the shotgun, unyielding and calm. "I'd prefer to resolve this without bloodshed." Jack snapped, trying to regain control of the situation, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Thompson chuckled softly, the sound echoing in the room. "You think cash is what gives this farm its value? Look around you." Jack's aggression faltered. Thompson's words struck a chord deeper than the bandits expected. They had been so entangled in their world made of lies and selfishness that the thought of hard work had become a distant memory. Pete shouted, but the fear creeping into his voice betrayed him. Before Pete could move, Thompson had shifted his stance, ready to defend. "What you don't realize, boys, is that this farm is not just my livelihood, it's my legacy. You can threaten me, but you'll soon discover that I'm not alone." As if on cue, the sounds of barking echoed from outside. Thompson's loyal dogs burst through the door, fur bristling, protective instincts roaring to life. "I'd reconsider your options," Thompson warned, his voice steady. The bandits froze momentarily, watching as the two dogs stood ready to defend their home, even more powerful than Thompson had anticipated. They were fierce loyalists, and the bandits could see the determination in their eyes. Max's bravado crumbled as he glanced at his friends, realization dawning on them. "This isn't what we signed up for," he whispered, taking a step back. Jenkins saw the moment of hesitation. "You've come into my home, desperate for money, but what happens when you leave?" Jack's eyes darted between Thompson and his friends. He exclaimed defensively, but even as he spoke, the weight of truth hung heavy in the room. "Survival doesn't have to mean becoming a thief," Thompson countered, lowering the shotgun slightly, his tone softening. Pete scoffed, but the exasperation in his voice wavered. Thompson spoke with a confidence that resonated. "I could use some hands around here, and you boys obviously need some direction." The bandits exchanged confused glances, caught between fear, pride, and the strange allure of transformation. Jack's hardened demeanor shifted. Perhaps they could escape the cycle they had fallen into. I don't know, Jack stammered, doubt now creeping in, intertwining with the fear that had brought them to Thompson's door in the first place. Thompson took a breath, sensing the fragile moment. I've had my fair share of struggles. This farm has been my life, and it's taught me meaningful lessons: resilience, dedication, and respect for the land. Danny interrupted, trying to maintain some semblance of bravado, but the challenge in Thompson's eyes confronted him. Look, boys, Thompson continued, urgency rippling through the air. I can call the sheriff right now, and this will end badly for all of us. Time hung heavy as the weight of their predicament sank in. Jack felt a spark of something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Was it really possible to break free from the life of theft and deception? As the moment dragged, old habits rattled like chains within their minds. They had taken before, but what if they tried giving? Just then the police sirens wailed in the distance, bringing with them a palpable urgency. Jack burst out, desperation taking over. We'll do it. Good choice, boys, Thompson said, relief sweeping over him like a wave. Let's get to work. As they stepped cautiously into an unfamiliar world, Thompson began showing the bandits the ropes, figuratively and literally. He guided them through the process of planting seeds, tending to animals, and harvesting crops. The sun-soaked days blurred into a whirlwind of activities, laughter, and unexpected camaraderie. Days turned into weeks, and the initial tension transformed into shared purpose. Jack, Pete, and Frank slowly shed their old identities, realizing they were capable of more than they ever imagined. Physical labor ignited a fire within them, a sense of achievement and belonging they had long thought they'd lost. I can't believe we're doing this, Pete murmured one evening, wiping sweat from his brow as they gathered after a long day. Satisfied smiles stretched across their faces. Thompson chuckled, leaning against the fence. You're doing more than that, son. As evenings turned into seasons, the bandits learned to embrace the earth. Their hands, once instruments of theft, became tools of creation. They celebrated small victories, a fresh harvest, a well-built fence, and the warmth of being part of something greater than themselves. One night they sat around a fire, shadows dancing in the flickering flames, laughter spilling into the crisp air. Jack grinned, tossing a twig into the fire, sharing a moment of levity that felt foreign yet welcomed. Oh, I remember, Thompson replied, a twinkle in his eye. That's the truth, Frank said, grinning widely. I thought you were just some old man. The vulnerability in their confessions forged new bonds, breaking the barriers that had once defined them. Each man carried scars, not just from their past, but from the journey taken to arrive at this moment of shared strength. Thompson watched with pride, feeling the weight of his lessons take root. He'd turned thieves into allies, guiding them toward redemption and purpose, new life blossoming in the once threatening shadows. Yet, as the friendship deepened, they knew they couldn't run from their past forever. Eventually, decisions would have to be made facing their old lives, perhaps even confronting their choices head-on. One afternoon, a tired old pickup truck rattled down the dirt road. Jack, busy tending to the sunflowers, glanced up and felt his heart race. It was the sheriff. Thompson came up beside him, observing Jack's panic. "It'll be all right, son," he said, and his calming voice was a grounding force. The sheriff stepped out, eyeing the changing farm and the men working under the warm sun. "Good afternoon, Thompson." "Afternoon, Sheriff," Thompson replied smoothly. The sheriff raised an eyebrow, surprised yet intrigued. "Yeah," Jack interjected, feeling bold, his voice steady. "We turned our lives around." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. He wasn't quite convinced, but the evidence before him spoke volumes. "Interesting." "We were," Pete admitted, shame creeping into his voice. The sheriff echoed, skepticism lacing his words. "Yes, sir," Thompson interjected. "These young men are helping me on the farm." The sheriff studied them, and as the moment stretched, fearful hearts thumped in their chests. "We are," Jack answered firmly, standing a little taller. A pause lingered, heavy with uncertainty, but the sincerity in Jack's voice began to chip away at the sheriff's skepticism. "All right," he said slowly, "but I'll be keeping an eye on you." Relief washed over the bandits, and they nodded, gratitude spilling over them. "Thank you, Sheriff," Thompson replied, his voice filled with strength. As the sheriff drove away, a new resolve settled over the group. Jack, Pete, and Frank exchanged glances, realizing this was just the beginning. They weren't defined by their past, but rather shaped by the choices they were making now. In the months that followed, the farm continued to thrive, a testament to hard work and determination. The Bandits became not just helpers but integral parts of the legacy Thompson had forged over the years. They built friendships, shared laughter, and celebrated life. Most importantly, they found purpose replacing their misguided actions with meaningful labor and cherished relationships. Each sunrise brought new opportunities, and each sunset marked the progress they made. And as winter set in, the quiet farm held warmth and resilience, ready to weather whatever storms came its way. Jack, Pete, and Frank had transformed not just as individuals, but as a family bound together by hope and understanding. Years later, as they gathered around the fire, laughter echoed as stories of their shared struggles stirred within them. They were more than just bandits who tried to rob a farm. They were men rebuilt from the ashes of their choices, learning that sometimes the stories that unfold in unexpected ways lead to the most profound transformations. Old Man Thompson smiled, comforted by the knowledge that they had all ventured through darkness to emerge into a brighter light. They had faced trials, embraced change, and most importantly, learned that a life built on honesty and hard work is one worth living. Together, they had crafted a new narrative, a story that would carry on, echoing hope and possibility across the rolling fields of their quiet farm, forever changed by the choices they had embraced. The sun had barely broken free from the horizon, casting a faint glow over the sprawling fields of Green Hollow Farm. A quiet morning blanketed the earth, disturbed only by the distant cawing of crows and the gentle rustle of leaves. This peaceful scene seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But on this ordinary day, a storm was brewing. Three figures lurked in the shadows of the nearby woods. They were bandits, faded jeans and hoodies swaying as they whispered among themselves. Jack the leader peered through the trees, eyes glinting with greed. "This is it," he breathed, the anticipation tightening his chest. "Tonight we hit it big." His companions, Pete and Tony, exchanged nervous glances. They were weathered by hard lives, shaped by bad choices. Pete's voice was barely more than a whisper, worry etched across his features. Jack dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "Come on, he's just an old man. He probably doesn't even keep a lock on his door." Their hearts raced with adrenaline as they crept closer, the faint outline of the farmhouse coming into view. It was a small structure, but every inch spoke of years of love, hard work, and dedication. Jack's confidence spilled over as he reached the porch, convinced they'd find easy pickings. Inside, Old Man Gus Thompson stood at his kitchen counter, his hands busy chopping vegetables for the day's stew. He had spent decades cultivating this land, his body lean and strong from years of toil. But tonight, as he sliced the vegetables, something felt off. He glanced out the window, brow furrowing at the sight of shadows flickering just outside the moonlit yard. "Something's not right," he muttered, unease settling in his gut. He set the knife down, reaching for the rusty old shotgun he kept by the door. It had been years since he'd had to think about it, but old instincts kicked in. This was his home, and he wouldn't let anyone threaten it. The bandits, unaware of the watchful farmer, plodded forward, their minds clouded by thoughts of riches. Jack kicked open the back door with a loud crash, startled crows erupting from the trees. "Get down, old man." Gus stepped into the hall, shotgun raised but pointed downward. He studied the intruders with calm eyes, a forceful presence despite his age. He asked, his voice steady, devoid of fear. "Look," Jack sneered, brandishing a crowbar he had brought along. Gus chuckled softly, stepping forward with confidence. "You boys think you've come for money." Jack paused, caught off guard by the old man's unexpected courage. In that moment, Gus felt a strange energy build around him, the sense of responsibility for not just his home but the very principles that had always guided him. "You see," he began, his tone firm yet inviting, "this farm isn't just about crops or cash. It's a place where hard work leads to something greater." Pete shifted uncomfortably, the gravity of the situation weighing heavy in the stale air. Jack was still reeling, trying to recalibrate his thoughts. "We can just leave, then," Pete interjected, voice cracking. "Or you can stay, help me out, and learn a thing or two," Gus responded boldly, his gaze unwavering. "Help!" Jack shouted, trying to regain control, but deep down, doubt gnawed at him. "Maybe not," Gus replied, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "But you could sure use it. What do you have to offer that's worth stealing? A life built on fear, uncertainty." For a moment, silence enveloped the room, the tension vibrating through the air. Jack's bravado started to crack. He looked at his friends, who were staring back at him with mixed expressions of confusion and fear. "Look around," Gus pressed on. "You can rob me of my possessions, but you can't take the essence of this farm. You can start fresh today." The bandits exchanged looks, uncertainty swirling amidst their bravado. This is not how a robbery was supposed to go. They were supposed to take and leave, not stand there contemplating their lives. "You all act like you don't have a choice," Gus continued, steady as a rock. "But everyone has a choice." Jack took a step back, his heart racing. "Absolutely," Gus affirmed. "You think that a quick theft will protect you from the world. You're just take, and where does that lead? Nothing but more chaos. But if you stick around, learn what it means to work hard." Jack hesitated, battling the voices in his head. "Then you can leave," Gus replied, shrugging. "But you'll always face the same choices, the same struggles." With the tension still thick in the air, Pete finally broke in. Maybe he has a point. Jack looked at him, frustration bubbling to the surface. Pete paused, uncertainty clouding his voice. "What if we—" Jack turned, uncertainty branching into every option before them. They were desperate men, but could they really change their paths? "Come on," Gus urged, breaking through their indecision. "You're at a crossroads." One by one, Jack, Pete, and Frank found themselves peering into the abyss of possibility. Could they really break free from the pattern of their lives? Gus pushed again, his calmness flooding the air, challenging them to step beyond fear. I want to try," Pete finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack stared, caught off guard by Pete's boldness. "It's better than being dirtbags for the rest of our lives," Frank added, a hint of determination blossoming in his eyes. With the weight of uncertainty transforming into shared resolve, the bandits found themselves nodding, embarking on a journey that would change them in ways they had never expected. "All right then," Gus said, a hint of a smile breaking on his weathered face. With that, they set to work under Gus's watchful eye, plunging into tasks that felt foreign yet gratifying. They planted seeds in the fields, helped tend to the animals, and learned the rhythm of farm life. The initial awkwardness faded, and they began to embrace not just the work but the sense of community and purpose that came with it. Days turned into weeks. Under the relentless sun, they discovered a new kind of strength, their hands calloused and weary but spirits soaring. They shared jokes and stories during breaks, bonding over hard work and quick laughter. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, its golden hues bathing everything in warmth, Gus sat with the three men beside a crackling fire. As the stars began to emerge, they shared tales of past struggles and hopes for the future. "This is something I never thought I'd have," Jack admitted, sheepishly looking at the ground. "I mean, I was just in it for the thrill, the money." "Now you're actually building something," Gus interjected, pride swelling in his chest. "That's the beauty of hard work." Pete leaned in, warmth wrapping around them as the fire crackled. "I didn't know it could feel this way," Frank exclaimed, enthusiasm bubbling over. "I never even thought about farming before." As they settled into the rhythm of their new lives, Joe felt the weight of his past lifting. Each day was a choice, a decision to embrace honesty, hard work, and the opportunity to become better versions of themselves. Time moved on, the farm flourishing under their care. But as summer turned to fall, they still knew that they couldn't run from their past forever. The shadows of their former lives lingered, and the fear of potential consequences loomed over them. One afternoon, as they worked in the fields, they saw a familiar figure walking towards them, Sheriff Daniels. The sheriff had been patrolling the area, and hesitation danced on his face as he approached. "Evening, Thompson," he greeted, catching sight of the three men. Gus met the sheriff's gaze, unwavering. "They're working here." "What?" Daniels raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "Yeah," Jack piped up, suddenly feeling the weight of the sheriff's judgment, his confidence wavering. The sheriff studied them closely. "That's the plan," Gus said firmly. Daniel's eyes flickered between Gus and the young men. "I know," Jack admitted, stepping forward, vulnerability evident in his voice. "But we were tired of living in the shadows." For a moment the silence hung thick in the air. Then Sheriff Daniels sighed, seeming to weigh his options. "You realize I'll be keeping an eye on you. This is your shot." "Understood," Gus said, resolving not to allow their hard work to go to waste. "Good," Daniels replied begrudgingly, tipping his hat as he turned to leave. As he walked away, the young men felt both relief and fear wash over them again. They had been given a chance, but could they maintain it? "Let's not blow it," Frank said, determination returning to his voice. "Agreed," Jack said, clenching his fists as the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. Days turned into weeks again, a steady march of productivity and newfound purpose. They tended to the fields, harvested crops, and built strong friendships. What had once been an act of desperation transformed into a life filled with laughter and commitment. Yet, as the seasons changed, the past remained vigilant. One chilly evening, as winter approached and frost kissed the ground, the sheriff returned, this time with another figure, 2 officers accompanying him. "Evening, gentlemen," he called out, strolling onto the farm with his hands tucked into his pockets. "We've had some reports of theft in the area." The tension in the air prickled and Jack felt panic bubbling in his gut. "Yeah, we heard about it," Gus replied calmly, willing his own heart to steady. The sheriff raised an eyebrow, observing them closely. "Your past may catch up to you, gentlemen. Just keep your noses clean, all right." With that they departed, leaving a heavy silence lingering in their wake. Jack, Frank, and Pete exchanged worried glances, uncertainty swirling in the air like the chill from the coming winter. Frank asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We stay on the right track," Gus said firmly, stepping into the role of mentor. "We've built something real here." But as the days turned into long winter nights, uncertainty gnawed at their resolve. They had embraced new lives, but the shadows of their past felt inescapable. One evening, while tending to the livestock, Jack noticed unfamiliar footprints leading to the barn. A sense of dread settled in, a visceral reaction that twisted his stomach. He called out, anxiously waving Pete and Frank over. Pete asked, concern cryptic in his words. Jack replied, tracing the imprints with his finger. "What if they're out there watching us?" Frank's breath hitched. "We can't risk it." Gus interjected, stepping forward. "Panicking won't help us. We need to keep a cool head." With determination pulsing through him, Jack took a deep breath. "Then let's set a watch." As twilight fell, they took shifts watching the farm, each man grappling with the thought of their past looming just outside their door. Days turned into nights filled with uncertainty, forcing them to confront their past every moment while also trying to create a brighter future. Then one fateful night, everything changed. Jack stood watch, heart pounding, every shadow pierced by the glow of moonlight. He caught sight of movement, a figure darting across the fields. Rousing from mudded sleep, Gus, Pete, and Frank sprang into action. Gus demanded, adrenaline pumping. Jack shouted, the stakes rising high as urgency wrapped around them. They crept quietly toward the movement, hearts pounding like drums in the night. As they approached, they caught sight of the figure, a scrappy young man rifling through their supplies looking for something to steal. Frank shouted, instincts kicking in as he rushed forward. The intruder turned, fear flashing in his eyes before bolting toward the woods. But before he could escape, Gus stood his ground, the shotgun raised high enough to intimidate, voice boomed like thunder. The man hesitated, glancing between the farmer and the bandits. "I was just looking for food," Pete echoed incredulously, stepping forward. "Please," the man begged, desperation palpable. "I've been living on the streets." "Stop right there," Gus announced, lowering the shotgun slightly. "We're all trying to survive here." With tension still thick in the air, the intruder slowly stepped away from the woods, still fearful but sensing a chance to redirect his fate. As he sat, all eyes turned on him, each bandit carrying their own past as the man began to share his story, a chance propelled by raw vulnerability. He spoke of struggles, hunger, and desperation, echoing feelings once familiar to the group. Jack, Pete, and Frank listened closely, realization settling over them like an old garment they could no longer wear. "We know what it feels like to be trapped," Jack admitted, surprising even himself with the honesty. "What if," Gus chimed in, "instead of breaking in, you join us? You have to work hard, but it'll be worth it." The intruder looked stunned, eyes widening with surprise and uncertainty. "Work?" "Yeah," Frank replied, warmth blossoming in his chest. "It's a chance to earn an honest living." The young man paused, contemplating the offer that dangled like a lifeline. Life had taught him nothing but struggle, but the glimmer of hope flickered within him for the first time in a long while. "All right," he finally said. As dawn broke, a new chapter began. They welcomed the newcomer into their fold, sharing stories and hard labor under the crisp morning sun. Huddled together as unlikely allies, it felt like they were forging something stronger than just a bond. It was a new beginning, a community built on shared struggles and renewed hope. In the days that followed, everyone worked side by side, tending to the fields, nurturing crops, and building unwavering trust. Together, they unearthed old scabs' pain and vulnerability, transformed through the spirit of hard work and resilience. What had once been an ordinary quiet farm turned into a hub of transformation, where broken men found purpose, and fear was replaced with belonging. Each season brought new challenges, but they faced them together, never faltering in their commitment to one another. As the sun set over the fields, the warmth of community wrapped around them, the air filled with laughter, and the promise of hope hung like stars in the night. Old Man Gus Thompson had not only defended his farm, he had become a shepherd of redemption, guiding lost souls back to the light. And in the end, they learned the greatest lesson of all, that sometimes a quiet life built on hard work and community is far richer than any treasure you could take by force. Together, they forged a legacy that resonated through the fields and blossomed in the hearts of everyone who dared to believe in second chances. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the quiet fields of Meadow Ridge Farm. A gentle breeze swept through the tall corn stalks, their leaves rustling in the soft wind. But for three figures lurking just beyond the trees, the tranquility was nothing more than a facade hiding their two desperate hearts. Jack, the leader, felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He whispered to his companions, "This is it. A farm like this, he's got to have cash stashed away." The thrill of the heist gripped him, swelling in his chest. His friends, Pete and Tony, shifted uneasily. They were lean, worn men who had seen their share of hard times. Pete's voice wobbled with uncertainty, catching Jack's attention. Jack snapped, his confidence wavering for just a moment. "Old folks like him are just scared of trouble." With bated breath, they crept closer to the farmhouse. As they approached the wooden porch, the floorboards creaked ominously beneath their weight. "Get ready," Jack hissed, raising his crowbar as he reached for the front door. Inside the cozy home, Old Man Thompson went about his evening chores. The aged farmer moved around the kitchen with a gentle grace, chopping vegetables for a hearty stew. But just as he tossed a handful of beans into a bubbling pot, he sensed a shift in the air. The distant caw of crows began to fade, replaced by an unsettling silence. Pausing, he wiped his hands on his apron and glanced out the window. Just beyond the yard, he saw shadows dancing around the porch. His heart dropped. Instincts honed by years of experience screamed at him. "Not today," he muttered, reaching for the old shotgun propped against the wall. The moment Jack kicked open the door, it slammed against the wall and the sudden noise echoed through the house like a gunshot. He shouted, stepping inside with bravado, his two accomplices flanking him. But instead of cowering in fear, Thompson stood firm. The shotgun was raised but not aimed, just a silent warning that spoke volumes. Jack hesitated, caught off guard by the determination radiating from the elderly farmer. He sneered, though anxiety crept into his voice. "This farm is my life," Thompson replied with a calm authority that left the bandits momentarily stunned. Pete, still clutching a baseball bat, nervously glanced at Jack. "Maybe we should just leave." Jack shot him a look, trying to maintain control. "Boys," Thompson spoke again, his voice even, "let's talk this out." Jack retorted, bravado slipping. The old man shrugged, unfazed. "You think a weapon is all it takes?" The air thickened with tension, as if time had frozen. Jack's bravado faltered the longer he stood before Thompson, whose presence demanded respect. "Just give us the money already," Jack said, his voice rising again as desperation seeped in. But Thompson held his ground, the flickering light casting shadows that seemed to dance around him, giving him an air of defiance. Thompson challenged, stepping forward. "I'll show you something far more valuable than cash. I could call the sheriff and I promise you'd regret it, or—" Jack blinked, trying to wrap his mind around the unexpected choices being laid before him like a path diverging in a dense wood. "Hard work," Thompson replied, his intensity unwavering. "This farm stands for something. You think you can take what's not yours, but you'll only find emptiness. Choose labor." The shadows of doubt flickered across the faces of the bandits, and for the first time they hesitated, unsure of their next move. Pete asked, shifting nervously. "No catch," Thompson said, lifting the shotgun slightly to indicate the direction of the door. "Just honesty and dedication." Jack scoffed, battling the uncertainty that gnawed at him. "Nothing," Thompson admitted. "But you'll end up in the same cycle, robbing, running, living in fear." As a tense quiet settled over the room, reality began to weave its intricate threads around the hearts of the three men. They glared at each other, weighing their options as an uncomfortable silence enveloped them. Thompson pressed, hoping for the spark of change he sensed in these lost souls. Jack took a step back, hesitation marring his features. A life of crime or a life of— He scoffed, though the emotional weight behind his words resonated throughout the room. Then Pete broke in, his voice trembling but earnest. Maybe we could try." Jack exclaimed, incredulity in his tone, but a flicker of uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "I'm serious," Pete pressed, an urgency shining through. Thompson watched as the winds of change began swirling around them, urging them toward something greater. Thompson's patience paid off. Gradually, Jack's skepticism faded, replaced by a glimmer of hope. "You really think we can do this?" "I know you can," Thompson assured him, the warmth of sincerity radiating in his voice. With uncertainty mixing with sudden resolve, Jack nodded slowly. "All right, we'll try it your way." "It will," Thompson interrupted, his commanding tone filled with conviction. And thus a new chapter began at Meadow Ridge Farm. The once determined bandits carried their burdens more gently. Now they bore the weight of potential instead of guilt. They learned how to plant and care for crops, their hands falling into the rhythm of the earth, feeling its pulse beneath their fingertips. Days melded into weeks as the trio grappled with the tasks of farming. They laughed while they worked, shared stories, and built camaraderie under the sprawling sky. Slowly, they shed the weight of their pasts, finding new identities in the sweat and labor of the fields. But shadows of doubt still followed them. They could not escape the watchful eyes of their past. The edges of old lives lingered, doubt seeping in like evening fog. One afternoon, while the trio toiled in the fields, they heard a familiar sound, the unmistakable rumble of a truck approaching. Instinctively, they glanced at each other, each feeling a surge of anxiety. "It's the sheriff," Pete whispered, panic flooding his voice, imagining the possibilities that loomed just beyond the farm's edge. As the pickup rolled to a stop, Sheriff Daniels stepped out, his expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Evening, Thompson." "Of course, Sheriff," Gus replied, wiping his hands on his jeans as he greeted the officer. Daniels eyed the bandits, who stood awkwardly, hands fidgeting at their sides. He murmured, skepticism lacing his words. "Last I heard, these boys were causing trouble." "Not anymore," Thompson retorted, holding his ground as pride began to swell in his chest. "These young men are working here now." The sheriff crossed his arms, his gaze flitting from Thompson to the bandits. Jack's heart raced at the scrutiny, feeling exposed under the sheriff's watchful eyes. "We're serious," he blurted. Sheriff Daniels scoffed, clearly unconvinced. "Yeah, but we're not the same guys who robbed a farmhouse," Frank piped up, desperation coloring his voice. "We're working hard." The sheriff's gaze hardened, skepticism etched in every line of his face. "You think one good deed wipes away the past?" Jack challenged, stepping forward. "Stay clean," Daniels replied, locking eyes with each of them. "Get your heads straight, I'll be watching." As the sheriff walked away, an uneasy silence settled over the farm, whispers of doubt echoing around them like a distant storm. "We stay focused," Thompson replied, reinvigorated by the conflict. "We work hard and prove to everyone, including ourselves, that we chose the right path." And so they did. They poured their hearts into the land. Each morning brought new challenges, Scorching days spent weeding, grueling evenings harvesting crops as they shared laughter born from hard work. The farm thrived, mirroring their growing resilience. But the haunting specter of their past never faded entirely. Weeks passed, and then one fateful night the wind gusted fiercely, rattling the windows as dark clouds rolled in. The thunderstorm broke like a dam, rain pouring down as flashes of lightning lit up the night sky. Inside the farmhouse, the atmosphere shifted. Jack paced the floor, unable to shake a gnawing feeling in his gut. "It just doesn't feel right," he said, glancing out the window. Pete asked, staring at the torrential rain. "I don't know," Jack replied, shaking his head, "but something feels off. It's like—" Their unease soared as thunder rumbled in the distance, followed by the sudden sound of rustling outside the farmhouse. Then came the unmistakable shape of a figure moving through the storm. Frank gasped, his heart racing. Without thinking, Jack grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. "Stay here," he commanded as he rushed outside into the storm, determination surging through him like a force of nature. Rain poured over him, drenching his clothes but stoking his fire. He made his way toward the direction of the movement, heart pounding as he approached the barn. The wind howled, battling against him like a wild beast. "Hey!" he shouted into the raging storm, the words barely escaping his lips over the noise of the downpour. And then it happened. A rustling grew louder and more frantic, shadows emerging from every direction. Jack's breath quickened, fear colliding with adrenaline. He swung the flashlight wide, illuminating a horrendous sight. A pack of bandits from his past hardened faces he recognized all too well, bearing weapons and driven by chaos. "Look who we found," one of them sneered, eyes glinting with malicious delight. Jack froze, gut twisting as dread coiled tightly around his insides. "Your little farms flourished, huh?" The storm raged harder, wind whistling through the darkness, mingling with the sound of thunder pounding overhead. Standing alone against the oncoming tide of shadows was like facing a storm head-on, a battle between his old life and everything he had worked for. Just as the words left his lips, Pete and Frank burst outside, radiating tension and uncertainty. Pete shouted against the wind. Jack commanded, standing tall before the oncoming threats. But as darkness encroached and the storm roared, uncertainty gripped them all. They were no longer just fighting for their pasts. They were fighting for their new lives, facing an unexpected reckoning. In that electric moment, everything hung in the balance, fate teetering on the edge of a knife. What would they do? Would they stand and fight for the life they had chosen, or would darkness swallow them whole? And as the horizon lit up with another flash of lightning, the call to courage echoed louder than the thunder, while the weight of their legacy loomed ahead, a battle yet unwritten. Would they embrace their fight, or let the tides of their past pull them under?